everyone. First off, my name is Kitty, and I am honored to serve as the president of the Boulder Library Foundation. And in some part, maybe that's why I get the honor of introducing my friend David Farnum, who is the CEO and, as I said, head mucky muck of the entire Boulder Library District system. David was hired actually twice by the City of Boulder. Well, first by the City of Boulder in 2013, and then 10 years later, he was hired again by the Library District after the district was incorporated. David has spent most of his adult life managing public libraries in Florida, Ohio, and Colorado. He is what I consider a transformational and strategic leader who strongly believes in the basic principles of public libraries and their mission to build an informed community. I think we in Boulder are very lucky to have David here serving in this capacity. I think we in Rotary are very lucky to have him back again to be speaking to us. And I know I am very lucky to be able to call him a friend. So please welcome David to the podium.
Thank you, Kitty, and thank you, Rotary. It's a pleasure. It is really an honor to be asked to come back. That's what you always are desiring, right, when you go to speak somewhere. And I have some good news for you. Like this, I consider this like my people, right? So I know I'm a kind of a data nerd. I'm also somewhat of an introvert, as you can imagine. I'm pretty prototypical librarian, and in other ways, totally not. But I do spend a lot of time reading about how people read and what commits them, and honestly, like the Rotary Club it is like book people, right? So by your participation in a civic organization, I know like what percentage more you are likely to visit a public library and to have read a book last year, and so congratulations, you are all very well read. I was asked here today to speak about the library district, but as if some of you were here, I know 2 years ago when I came to speak, and I love talking about public libraries. I have spent my entire adult life working at public libraries. I grew up in a town that didn't have one, and I know and appreciate the value of them in my adult life and what they can mean for a community. So if you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard me say that I believe that libraries are the last great unbroken promise of a democratic society. I say that with no irony whatsoever. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I believe that it also contains kind of like the nugget of what could potentially be a future for our community and really for our society. So how did libraries come about? And could they be invented today? Or a better question maybe is, will they exist tomorrow? These are the kinds of questions that I ask myself every day. The biggest supporters of public libraries are constantly asking themselves, you know, what is the role of the public library in today's society? So could it be invented today? I don't really know, honestly. That is such a hard question because libraries and public libraries in particular are kind of a strange anomaly in our society. I mean, you look at it and you think like, this is a nutty idea, right? But the nutty idea began a long, long time ago and has existed in this country for hundreds of years. And if you read, about or listen to what's going on all around the world, and to some extent in our society here in the United States today, you'll recognize the important kind of value that they provide. So there's a nice little myth that we all kind of tell in libraries, or used to tell in libraries, that Benjamin Franklin was the inventor of the public library. And I know a lot of people buy that story. It's just not true. He was obviously an important member in bringing about principles of the Enlightenment to the public library, but he never created a public library that was free and open to the public. That really was a responsibility that happened to a women's movement. So, and this is true of Boulder as well. So women's groups, community groups, long before they could vote, long before they could own property, long before they could have a bank account, during the progressive era in the United States in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, they came up with this really crazy, nutty idea that wouldn't it be interesting if we all kind of pooled resources to buy books so that everyone had access to knowledge. And it was kind of a mission. It's interesting to think about that when you ask the disenfranchised what it is they want to do to improve their society, they come up with an idea of a public library. But the nugget of the idea, and it wasn't really an idea so much as it was a movement. I mean, this was happening all around the country. The nugget of the idea really was sharing, right? So how can we share everything that we have in a community in Boulder in the 1870s, one that had some level of affluence, and Chris knows all these stories as well. I mean, there were women going door to door, knocking on people's houses and saying, could you donate $2 or could you donate a book to create this kind of public library, a reading room, so that everyone in our community has access to knowledge and information and can better themselves. That nugget, that idea is really the kind of the birth of the public library movement. While Benjamin Franklin had a role, it was these women who drove the kind of bus all across the United States. And the really crazy part of it is they convinced like the biggest robber baron of the 19th century to bankroll the whole thing. So Andrew Carnegie was the one writing the checks to build libraries, and Andrew Carnegie is responsible for the public library on Pine Street that was built in 1907 here in Boulder as well. But it wouldn't have happened without the energy. And I think the other thing that they enshrined and that I find so compelling even to this day were a number of principles, Enlightenment principles, all of which in our lifetimes have been politicized and repoliticized. And when I started out in libraries over 30 years ago, I thought, well, this seems sound. This seems pretty simple. But nevertheless, I mean, I'll read them off to you. The basic principles of public librarianship are a commitment to the freedom of speech, that public libraries are free and open to everyone. We protect the privacy of individuals and what they choose to read and know. And we have a commitment to resist censorship in all of its forms. So sounds pretty simple. Like if you said this 30 years ago, I think everybody in the room would have been like, yeah, whatever. Today, those are all politically charged concepts and ones that we battle with in a daily kind of environment. So a big part of public librarianship is maintaining and standing up for those principles. I know they guide me to work every day and inspire me to provide a service within a community, which in Boulder, our mission is connecting people and ideas in order to improve people's lives and to improve the resilience of our overall community. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of very synchronous with the Rotary's mission as well. And I love the four phrases. It seems to me like the fairness one is the hardest one these days, right? Like truth, I'll never give up truth. They'll be kicking me in the head in my grave before I give up on that one. The fairness one is like, it has to be really hard, I think, in its application these days because it's a difficult concept to come across. So I want to talk a little bit about the library district, because I know that's why you asked me here today. The library district was a concept that had been floating around Boulder for over 30 years. When I got here in 2013, 2014, it was in my work plan. So I was handed a thing from the city manager. It was like, you have to investigate alternative funding for the library. And I was like, can you give me a couple of years? And they did. And we did make a lot of strides forward in those first couple of years. I think in our third year, we won Library of the Year, which was a pretty big accomplishment. And we did it without asking for a dime, right? It was a matter of really finding the efficiencies in a public library that I think were maybe a little bit lacking through neglect and lack of oversight. There had been 8 directors in 7 years prior to my arrival, and that leads to a kind of a little bit of a dysfunction, and there was also a lack of attention to the library. So that was, those first 3 years, and then we began in earnest looking at the question about how do we fund the public library. And I believe when I was here last time, 2 years ago, the district idea was already on moving forward to the ballot, but in those intervening years, really between 2018 and until the time the citizens group formed a ballot initiative, I presented to city council 17 times over the course of 3 years, each time with a different model on how to sustainably fund the public library. Now, the district was one of those options, but there were a whole lot of other options too. We were trying to be creative in terms of figuring out the way in which we could sustainably fund the public library. And since it was on my work plan and my boss, the city manager, was telling me I had to figure out a way to get the library off the city's payroll, I was highly motivated to do it. In the end, the Citizens Initiative went forward. Some controversy, I think, at the ballot. It won in 2022 by, I believe, 7 percentage points. So a close election. So I recognize that like fully 46% of the public didn't vote for it. I mean, I think there were legitimate arguments as to like, gosh, my taxes. I feel like that is a strong argument in any community you live in. It's one that carries less weight, I think, in Boulder, where Boulder seems to never tire of taxes and always is voting in favor of them from historically. And so interesting kind of place where we were. 2023 was a transition year. That was the year I was hired. I was still the City of Boulder's Public Library Director, but I was also the Public Library Director for the Boulder Public Library District. I was the one and only employee until we hired a lawyer. Soon after I got on board, the Board of Trustees hired a lawyer, and we went through a year of transition in order to stand up an organization essentially with a $20.8 million budget. And if you've never done that, it's a little bit like what you imagine. It's starting over from scratch. The city was unambiguous all along. They had said, we want a clean and complete and as efficient break as we possibly can. The clean part, I don't think I fully understood what it was they meant until we actually went through the process, because they totally meant like completely broken, and we had to stand up an entire system, which was HRIS systems, even the technology. So all of the technology that you see in the library today, I think we closed for 3 days for the public, where the city came in and took back all of its property. We had a consultant and a team of library people coming in right after them and reinstalling basically everything. It was probably the most triumphant moment, because we had found out about it in August of 2023. Mid-August, the city said, like, yeah, we're not going to do any of that. It's your own. And then between August and December 23rd, we created an entire network connecting all of our libraries and having all the public PCs. It was heady times. I'm glad it's over. I don't wish that kind of transition onto anybody. It was really, really exciting. But really, the excitement for me began, I'm a librarian at heart, not in starting up a business, but in actually getting back to running a library. So beginning January 2024, the library district began to exist. Since that time, we have restored hours back to pre-pandemic levels. We've opened up a new library in Nobo. We've opened up the Canyon Theater to the public, which is an interesting pilot program. Essentially, the Canyon Theater was available to the public, but underutilized because there was a cost associated with it. So the cost associated with it was like the cheapest venue in town, but our intention was to make it free. So just like another meeting room in the public library, we decided to make the Canyon Theater available to the public for free for anything that you want to do there. We don't curate the content. We do keep an eye out for any potential controversy, but controversy comes along with freedom of speech, and so we don't shy away from it either. Anyone who wants to book the Canyon Theater can do so. We reopened the cafe. Did I say already, we opened up the brand new library in Nobo, which is an exciting moment for us. I don't know. I spoke to several people before who have actually been there. It was a long, drawn-out process as well, like a 6-year project from design to finish. And construction during the pandemic, if any of you all were doing it, it was a little bit of a nightmare because, the price of wood jumped, all the things that you would think of for a building. The price of steel jumped 60%. The price of wood was all over the place, the price of glass. And so we engineered and re-engineered that building many, many times. The day we had scheduled for the grand opening, which was, I believe, July 31st or sometime end of June, we didn't have occupancy on Friday morning, and the party was scheduled to happen on Saturday. We got occupancy at 11 o'clock in the morning on Friday. I was there with a couple of other staff members, and I said, let's just open the doors and see what happens. So we just opened up the doors, and literally within 30 minutes, a family came in, a mother with 3 small children. I'm the doofus standing at the door. They did not speak English and were speaking to me in Spanish. I did take a lot of Spanish when I was in high school, but it's been a long time. I was fortunate that one of my facilities guys was there and immediately had a conversation with her, and the manager and most of the staff at the North Boulder Library do speak Spanish, and so the manager had come out from behind the scenes. They were there for an hour and a half. They all got library cards. They checked out armloads of books, and before they left, they hugged all the staff members. And it was like, all of the headaches around the building project went away in that one single moment where I was just like, this is exactly what we put the library here for in the first place. And it's been a steady stream of that ever since. So the next thing's coming. We have a gun barrel library that will be opening up in a year. We've already begun the demolition of the interior of the building. We leased the old bank, the first bank, at Lookout and 65th Street, right in downtown Gun Barrel. It was the first bank. It's an interesting story. The building itself was the first bank. So the Williams brothers, who had built most of Gun Barrel, they have a great story about how they traded 2 bad farms in Breckenridge for 5 bad farms in Gun Barrel. And then, but they actually bought a savings and loan and created First Bank in order to finance the build-out of residential areas in Gun Barrel. Fascinating story. The bank is a beautiful building. It was built in 1975. It's been vacant for a couple of years, and the library will be going into there. I think we'll open up next year in June. That's only the beginning of it. We've opened up a lot of services, restored a lot of hours. But I mean, I think the program that probably speaks best to you and really speaks best to me, because it's really about what a nugget of what the library is about, is our literacy and an outreach program. So the literacy and outreach program, Boulder Reads, I think some of you are familiar with Boulder Reads. It's been around for 40 years. It's won a number of awards. It's an adult literacy program that started out in helping people get a high school diploma or simply learn to read. It's morphed over the course of those 40 years into now I think half of the students coming in are learning English as a second language. We started a program for kids. There's daycare services when adults are coming in to learn how to read. And you can do anything you want really in that program. You have to have an 8th grade reading level in whatever language is your native language before you can actually begin the program. But from there, we will take you through to a high school diploma, to a college degree, to studying for your driver's exam, to studying to get a CDL license, to getting passing nursing exams. It is a great, great program that serves 100 or so people every single year. I have been asked by the head of the program to make sure that I indicate that we are in need of volunteers. So I know you guys already commit a lot of your time to the public. There is no more rewarding volunteer experience, I think, than helping someone learn to read and helping someone learn to learn. So if you are at all interested in it, reach out to me or reach out to the library. There's a single place on the webpage where you can go on and volunteer. But tell your friends and the people you know. It's probably an hour or 2 a week, and you probably a 1 or 2 year commitment, but you're really helping someone to gain the tools so that they can thrive in our society, in a society where now it's like knowing how to read and knowing in some ways how to learn, and it doesn't require any special skill from the tutors. We will give you that when you come in. There's a training program. We match you up with with a student who has a need and try to find similarities. And some of these pairs have lasted for 15 years, right? So the pairs, there's one pair in particular of a young man who came here from Ghana. He first learned English. He second learned to get his high school diploma. His tutor is still with him, and at this point, they have been back to Ghana to visit his family and are working on the elements, what they would need to do both here and there to build a public library in his hometown in Ghana. So that's an amazing relationship. That's not what we're asking when you sign up for the program, but it is a component of it. Last year, in the annual report, I wrote the introduction about a student of ours, a single mother who did not have much English skills, but whose oldest son, was failing in high school. She signed up for the program in Boulder Reads in order to both inspire her son, and also she wanted to create a competition so that she was going to challenge him as to who could get their high school diploma first. And so she actually did complete her high school diploma. Her son did as well. Through the pandemic, this woman who's working a full-time job, raising 4 kids, and also challenging her oldest son to learn to love learn to love to learn. So great program, and I would encourage you to sign up for it. That program is one that we've had on the books since 2007. It was never with the intention of expanding it. Now with the district, we are expanding it dramatically. It was really 1 or 2 people, 1.5 employees. I believe the department now is 4, and we're looking to add 3 more next year in order to take that program out into the community. We've extended it to children. There's a program called Reading Buddies, where a college-age student or a high school-age student partners with a 2nd to 4th grader who is having trouble with reading. It's a 12-week program. They come together every week. At the end of it, the end product in each year is a written book. So the child actually writes a book and then presents that book by reading it publicly, mostly to the parents and the friends of other, but an amazing program, which has just had great impact throughout our community. And the starting point is nothing, right? You come in, it's free, we match you up with a tutor, and the program goes. I think my watch stopped here. I want to talk a little bit more about the district, because I know there are a lot of people, what are you doing with the money, right? So the budget with the city, I don't know how many of you tried to read a city budget. I mean, I worked for the city and I see some others here who have worked for the city. It's a complicated 300-page document with a lot of places here and there, and you really have to know how to read the 300 pages in order to understand how any department is funded. And I'm not saying I was an expert on it, but I did spend 10 years there trying to figure it out. The budget for the library was about $16 million prior to the separation, 16 to 17 in that wheelhouse, if you wanted to consider facilities maintenance. Now it's 2021, roughly $21 million. So opening a new building is about $1 million of operational costs. So we have Nobo and Gun Barrel. The outreach program, again, it's not $1 million yet, but I anticipate if we are to meet the needs within the community, that program, I don't fully know exactly what the lid is on that program, because I think the impact has been impressive. So I think it could easily eat up $1 million in that program. And then the big part that I think most people don't think about is the buildings themselves. So the way the governmental agreement occurred between the city and the Boulder Public Library District was the city owns, they own all of the assets with the exceptions of the ones that if you imaginarily could pick up the buildings and shake them, so all the stuff that would fall out, that's ours. And everything else that's stationary is the city's. So we don't own the buildings, but we have a responsibility for their upkeep and rent and whatever else we have attached to them. So this is a complicated thing. Is that an asset or is that a liability? We don't own them, so we can't leverage it for points off of a loan, which we're not going for any loans. But it's really just, it is in some ways a liability. But this is the hard part, and it's a hard part, I think, for our Board of Trustees as well. I may sound like a communist or something. I don't care if we own them, right? It's not the building, the library is not mine, the library's to own. It's not the city's to own. In my mind, it is a community asset that has been built by generations of people here that none of us will ever know. Carnegie contributed money. The community asset, which is the Boulder Public Library, has been built over the course of 118, 119 years, and I feel a heavy responsibility to take care of them as best we possibly can. So what does that look like? From a buildings point of view, the average age of the buildings with Nobo, with the brand new building, is now 51 years of age. I think only one of them was built with the idea of lasting 50 years. None of the rest of them were. So there's a heavy duty. If you manage a home, you know how complicated it can be to own an old home and how much you have to spend to fix it up. We spend on average about $4 million a year in terms of building maintenance and addressing a backlog of facilities maintenance issues which have not been addressed for the past 2 decades. It'll take us a decade or two probably to catch up. I keep setting financial models to say this is the point at which we will catch up with that financial liability, and then something else breaks, and I'm thinking like, we're never going to get it. The other question that would be, is how much energy do we put into making these buildings more sustainable and more resilient, right? Because that's an important question, I think, for you. It's an important question for me. It's an important question for the City of Boulder and all of our residents is, a boiler breaks, you can easily go back and put another gas boiler, and that may be the cheapest route to go financially. but it's not the cheapest route to go in terms of the long-term costs. So we are having to look at every single thing that breaks and looking at how to replace it with some form of green option. And so in that sense, it's a little bit more difficult to predict the cost of doing so. Right now, on my 10-year model, we are spending over $54 million on building maintenance alone in the next 10 years. So that's a chunk of the change. When people ask you what's all the money for, it's really to start taking care of those buildings which were in somewhat of disrepair and that the city had announced in 2021, but their facilities master plan, it was the intention to de-accession, along with a lot of other buildings that the city owns in the city. It's a big liability for the city, and so they are looking now to de-accession a lot of the older buildings that they own. The library was just one among them. The last thing I want to talk about, and then I'll open it up to questions, was a lot of people had questions about how does the Board of Trustees come about, right? So the Board of Trustees is it's an interesting process. So the City Council and the Board of County Commissioners, so the County Commissioners and the City Council together form a committee that then selects and interviews candidates to be on the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees for the Library District are my boss. Doug Hamilton is here today. He's the board chair right now. It's 7 board members. It's a 5-year term. I have 3 lawyers currently. It used to be 4. There is a head of an IT security for a large company that has offices here in Boulder. There are a couple of people with past experience in government. One is a former school board member, and I'm drawing a blank on, there's one who's an independent filmmaker. So it's a great commitment. I don't know that they really know how much of a commitment it is when they signed up. During the transition, the Board of Trustees was meeting every week. We were going through every single financial contract, building out, HRIS systems, IT systems. We had to make decisions pretty quickly and move pretty fast. So I think they were all pretty overwhelmed. A couple of them dropped out after the first year. We got 2 new members. It's a little bit more steady and more library-like right now, but we do have to wrap our heads around a strategic plan because the current one that we're operating with, although it ends in 2028, the board keeps saying it ends in 2026, and so I'm trying my best to get it done by 2026. I think we'll be there, and then we'll start over with another strategic plan. I think that's enough for me, and I'm sorry, my time, I must have bumped it because it stopped it. I still have 10 minutes and 42 seconds according to my timer. What, if any, questions are there? Yes, sir.
I have one question for you.
Yeah.
You've been here in Boulder helping out for many, many years. My question is if you ever had the opportunity to meet a beloved Boulder Rotarian, Diana Sherry.
Yes.
Diana Sherry helped
Found Boulder
start
Reads, yeah.
Boulder Reads many decades ago, and you have honored her in your pamphlet describing Boulder Reads, which is really great. So you have met her. That is wonderful. And so you know that Boulder Rotary wants to volunteer for your program.
I do know that.
And so the more we learn and we can talk to our people here, we're going to be some great volunteers for you.
Thank you very much. There's in some cultures in American culture we recognize monuments and buildings and that kind of thing, but we don't recognize people enough, I don't think. And in some cultures they recognize people as community treasures. Diane was one of those. Actually, the money she raised, it's an endowment from which we draw for Boulder Reads and other programs. There's still money left in that account. So she did amazing, amazing work. There are a number of people who like that, who are just, deeply committed and have a deep sense of purpose, which that program does give you a deep sense of purpose, the Boulder Reads program. There was another question back there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thank you for speaking to the club today. When the ballot measure came up, I was opposed to it because I share a vision that you have of the library, which is it's an obligation of a democratic society to provide libraries. And it's an obligation for the city to provide libraries in the way it provides roads. So the thought that the library would be offloaded, so to speak, out of the city budget, I was against the concept. And also, I thought, well, there's going to be a lot of people voting who will be happy to offload it out of the city budget because it's going to be picked up by property owners.
Yeah.
And they won't pay for it at all.
Yeah.
So that was my concern. And the other concern I had was that the budget would, from the city, so if the money's taken out of the city budget, which I guess it was 9.2 million in 22 or 16 million, as you say, they took it out of the budget, but the city, I'm sure, did not lower their overall budget by $16 million. They just pocketed the money that was going to the library. Yeah. And my final comment, which is that I feared that the cost of the libraries would go up, 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 up once they were paid for by property owners. Yeah. And it appears that's what's happening because if I heard you correctly, it's gone from 16 million now to 21 million. And, you know, in another 5 years, it'll probably be 35 million.
Yeah, I don't know that. So, the commitment to North Boulder, so North Boulder, land was donated in 1988, I believe. Land was donated in 1988 for North Boulder to have a library, right? The city never found the wherewithal to do it. We delivered on the commitment. The folks in Gun Barrel had a library, a public library that was grant funded in 66 and 67 and have basically been clamoring for one ever since. I mean, they were showing up at meetings when I got here. And so I'm very proud to say that we can open that location. We have other needs, but honestly, that is a major part of the capacity, right? So North Boulder and Gun Barrel were the two underserved areas that are currently detailed and have been detailed in what the city calls a master planning process for probably 30 or 40 years. There are plans coming forward, right, in Arapahoe and 55th, East Boulder, but I don't know when that happens. It could be 20 years from now, but I don't know what the need is for another library building after we do Gun Barrel. We'll have to replenish the libraries that we do have. They're constantly in need of care and upkeep, but it's not like we're going to be building a bunch of other libraries. It really is no bone gun barrel. So getting from zero to capacity basically in a couple of years is a monumental challenge. I hope you can appreciate that. For me, it's been kind of mind-boggling, but it is also difficult to wrap your heads around the fact that after 20 years of scarcity, the library is suddenly, we are going to be fulfilling basically all of the needs that the community had requested, but in a very short period of time. In the course of about 2.5 years, we are beginning to deliver on all of the requests the community had and all the promises that were made in the ballot. The city finance thing, I don't really want to go into. I worked for the city for 10 years. I don't know what ordinary residents know about the city's budget. I felt it, but I didn't really have a say. I felt it imperative that they do talk about what they were going to do with the money that had been in the libraries, just because I'm a taxpayer too, right? I kind of wanted to hear that conversation. I went, that was an 18th meeting, if you want to count it. I showed up at that meeting too for a public discussion. It was on the agenda. They spoke all of 2 minutes, I think, on that topic, and that was it. So different council than the one that's there now, but I don't know what other community in the United States that the governing body could have just had no discussion about it, but that was okay in Boulder. They never discussed what was going to happen with that $16 million. Again, I think a lot of it's hard to parse because it is a question of capacity, right? Like, we had people from finance, from facilities, from HR that are broadly employed by the city that helped us in those kind of things. So you can't cut off half of a HR person and let them go. So I think the city saw it as an increased level of capacity, but we were a small portion of the overall city budget, which is around $400 billion, if you consider the capital costs.
Okay. I think we have time for maybe 2 questions.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I got a question regarding the operational part of the library. in a transitional situation, what's been the effect of electronic books as against paper books?
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, and actually, so this is something that obviously I've been working with my entire career. You know, the biggest moment in electronic books was when the Kindle came out, 2010. So up until that, I started circulating ebooks in libraries in 2000. Like I don't think most of you even knew ebooks existed in 2000. I was circulating them in public libraries then, but by 2010, when the Kindle came out, it jumped from about 2% of the overall market to 22% of the market in 2 years' time. And so a lot of time, we were trying to catch up, right? And libraries were trying to find the money and additional money to supply ebooks. Ebook vendors, it's a long story. I spent 2 years of my career doing this. They don't sell directly to public libraries. They won't. So the same book that you can buy on Amazon for $12.99, or they charge me $80 for, or I can only buy it to lease it. So I can lease the book. Once it goes out 26 times, then I have to buy it again. And that's not an unfair bargain. I mean, it sounds crazy, but honestly, that's if it goes out 26 times, it's a screaming good deal for me. The only problem with it is I assume all the risk, right? So nobody wants to check it out. I'm left holding the bag. What happened then after 2012 was the ebook market kind of stabilized. So I don't know about you. I used to do a lot of talks on this, but if you ask people like how many people exclusively read ebooks, it's almost nobody, right? There are some people, myself included, I exclusively read physical books. Like that's my bag. I love the smell. I love the feel. I have memories attached to it and that kind of thing. But nevertheless, the ebook market took off. And what I used to say was, you know, it's fine for you, an adult like who has some extra spending money to buy all the ebooks you want, because on average, an American reads about 11 books a year. There are some of you, and you're all Rotarians, so you probably read 20 or 30. There are some people, obviously, that read 50 or 60. Sad news, men over the age of 50 have the likelihood of reading one full book the rest of their life. But the averages work, so women, and especially educated women, read at a much higher rate than everyone else. So look around the table, they're all reading more books than you are. But an interesting thing happened in the pandemic. So the market had kind of settled out about 22, 25%. This is overall consumption of books in the United States. The ebook market had settled out about 22, 25%. And then in the pandemic, it jumped again, right? So it jumped to 35%. We currently at the public library, all the circulation, so slightly over a third, 33, 34% of all of the books that are read from the public library or checked out from the public library are ebooks. Another significant portion is a service that we began many years ago. It's the hold system. So that's one of the most expensive services that we provide, because I have to have a person go pull the book on the shelf. We wrap it up. We set it on the shelf for you. That service also dramatically increased during the pandemic and is staying there. And what we've noticed is that a lot of younger people are using it. Like my 8-year-old son, I have an 8-year-old son, he uses the hold system exclusively. I'm like, come on, man, I have to send staff members to go to get the shelf to pick that book. So it is interesting in the way in which habits have changed among readers. You know, libraries aren't solely about consumption. I mean, that is a transactional kind of thing, and it's an important part of what we do. But I believe our real purpose is around standing up for the right to read. We stand up for the right to read, and you know, the pinnacles kind of a democratic society are really what we represent. And what we do is about literacy, but there is a large transactional part of our business, and it's changing, right? So higher usage of ebooks. We'll see if that 35% levels out. Now, again, I suspect that it will. Most people are pretty ecumenical. You'll read a physical book if you're lying in bed or sitting on your favorite chair. But if you're traveling and you load 5 books on an ebook reader and you take them with you on a trip. And that's what's convenient. And we have to adjust our business model, our operational model, to the convenience of readers, because those numbers where it used to be you could come into the library, it didn't matter what you asked for. We would say, we can get it for you. That's a very expensive system. It's called interlibrary loan. We go and borrow the book from California or God knows where, England. And then that book is shipped to you physically with gas guzzling vehicles and planes and everything else to arrive, and then we put it on the hold shelf and you pick it up. That was a service that we provided, and in some ways, it was worth the money because staff had the ability to say, I can get you anything you want, right? That's priceless. It's turned into a service of convenience, and I don't begrudge it whatsoever. It's like people look for books online. They put holds on 30 or 40 things. When the book comes in, we put it on the hold shelf. You come in, your visit to the library is pretty quick. You grab your books and you go. It's just where that stops, I don't really know. I think it's only going to keep growing because of the fact that young people are using it. The 20-something crowd, I'd say they're more than 50% of them are using the library in that way. They come to the library to hang out, but checking out books, they do it online, download the book, or put it on hold. It's an interesting conundrum for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've been there and loved it, the new library. But I want to go with Kitty DeKeeper the next time she goes because it's a singing sidewalk.
Yes.
And if she wears those shoes, I mean, you know what.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the new public library, if you haven't been there, go, the North Boulder Public Library. It is a joy. It's a pleasurable place. It has all the right elements, right? You walk in and you feel like it's something bigger than you, and there's a kind of a sacred element to it, I think. But it's also just like a really cool and fun place to hang out. So please come to the public library, enjoy it. I know you guys already do because I know your demographic, and the Rotarians are civic people, and civic people are the people who read more, go to engage in public discourse, and that's really what the public library is all about. So thank you all very much for having me.
David, thank you so for coming and catching us up in what's going on in the library. I'm there often. Every time I go through the door, the environment is so friendly, so warm. I also had occasion to meet at the North Boulder. What a spectacular building. That's just fabulous. As you know, Rotary has been very responsible for stopping polio, to just maybe a few cases today. So I want you to know that we are donating in your honor and in your name 100 doses of polio vaccine. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much.